Bienvenidos, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Mi nombre es Sabrina Galante, soy líder del mercado latinoamericano de Populous. Primero agradecer al World Football Summit por tan cálida bienvenida. La verdad es que en nombre de todo nuestro equipo quiero simplemente compartir que a nosotros nos enorgullece mucho ser parte de la transformación de la industria del deporte y el entretenimiento en esta región. Populous, si no saben quiénes somos, es reconocido de diseñar algunos de los estadios más emblemáticos del fútbol mundial. Y seguramente los van a reconocer, como el Estadio Wembley, el Estadio de los Emirates, el Estadio Tottenham en Inglaterra. Y les voy a mencionar algunos estadios que quizás suenen con ustedes, ya que se aproxima el Mundial de Clubes ahora en Estados Unidos, que empieza en este mes. Y Pachuca va a estar jugando en 2 de nuestros estadios, de los 8 que hemos hecho para la MLS, el Geodis en Nashville y el TQL en Cincinnati. Y bueno, y aquí en esta región hemos tenido el privilegio de estar involucrados en el Estadio BBVA, la Casa de los Rayados, el Estadio de los Chivas en Guadalajara, y de cara al Mundial 2026 estamos trabajando en el Estadio Azteca, hoy conocido como el Estadio Banorte. Bueno, vamos a hablar de nuestra práctica de eventos, o también conocida como infraestructura temporal, cómo la planificación de un evento puede dejar un legado duradero en la ciudad y en el país. Vamos a hablar de la importancia de involucrar a expertos en eventos globales, desde las primeras etapas del diseño, cómo desarrollar un plan maestro, ya sea para una ciudad o sea para un venue, y a veces por qué elegimos infraestructuras temporales en vez de permanentes. Bueno, let's go to English now. Yes, are we ready? It's an honor to be on stage with me today. I'm joined by Partho in the corner over there. Partho is a senior principal at Populous. He leads our Latin American stadiums. He has 30 years of experience, international experience. Some of his portfolio includes the iconic Arena das Dunas for the World Cup 2014 in Brazil, French National Rugby Stadium. He has been involved in Camp Nou in Barcelona, New Perth Stadium in Australia, and currently in the renovation of Estadio Azteca, o Banorte, for the upcoming World Cup. Next to me is Jeff Keas. Hi, Jeff. Senior Principal and Global Events Practice Leader at Populous. Jeff has shaped major sporting venues and events on world stage. He has also 30 years of experience, and his expertise is bridging architecture and event planning to deliver intentional solutions. Jeff has worked on 11 complete Olympic Games and 4 upcoming, 4 FIFA World Cups for men and women, and 1 upcoming. He's a leader in legacy-focused design, especially in temporary architecture, leaving a lasting footprint. So, hello, gentlemen. How are you? Great. So before we begin our conversation, we're gonna play a short video so you all can see what the events practice at Populous does every day. Can we play the video, please?
At Populous, we have a singular focus: to design experiences. Experiences at the global intersection of sports, entertainment, culture, and live events. We keep at the forefront by asking ourselves and our clients, what is possible? What if we designed the first purpose-built venue for a pro esports team? What if we could unify neighborhoods within the design of a soccer stadium? What if we designed a multi-sensory venue with the largest spherical array of media ever created? Or placed a rolling roof over the most sacred ground in tennis? Our anticipation of what's next shapes our reputation for pushing the limits of what's possible. Our understanding of live events allows us to bridge the gap between architectural design and event operations. With this holistic approach of bidding, design, planning, procurement, site management, and operation of the event, we're able to create the most memorable and iconic events in the world. From the NBA to NBA 2K. From NHL to NHL at Lake Tahoe. From MLB to MLB at Field of Dreams. Experiences beyond imagination. design the places where people love to be together.
Muchas gracias. No sé si han visto ahí el estadio BBVA. Bueno, so let's start with a couple of questions to both of you. Populous is known for designing iconic venues and unforgettable experiences around the world. How do you contribute to that vision with what you do? Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. We are so lucky to work on such amazing projects and with amazing clients. And so with that, we're always looking at these journeys. And sometimes the journeys are quite long. Sometimes we start our projects 5 years in advance, even 10 years in advance of when a project may get realized or when an event may happen. So I think our approach is always to look at this thing holistically. We may start 10 years out, but we're always looking at when the event may happen, which may happen several years later. I think when we do that, we're always looking at the experience, the experiential side of that. We're helping our clients develop their vision, helping our clients develop their story so they can tell this story to their fan base. And I think with that story and I think the experiential side, it all comes back to memories because we're trying to create these amazing memories, these vessels of memories.
Thanks, Jeff. And again, it's a real privilege to be here on this panel with Sabrina and Jeff. One of the things that's interesting in the question is, you asked about what we do, but in reality, we need to talk about Populous, and how Populous came to be and who are the people who work at Populous, which make our roles actually quite easy. When I joined Populous, I remember we were given tickets to go to visit events. And that tradition still continues to make sure that everyone at Populous experiences what they're working on. That is very, very essential. The other thing is, in that environment, I've also seen and interacted with people who are NFL players, Wallabies, people who played at the national level, at the professional level, but they're also architects and engineers who work with us. That gives you a vision which you will never get in another environment or another design studio. That allows us and allows me to make my job so much easier to deliver stadiums, not just in Latin America, but all over the world.
I love that. And at the end of the day, it's all about people, right? So everything we do is thinking about how they want to experience these venues. Right?
That's a very good point, Sabrina. And Jeff, you pointed at that. We design experiences. The buildings are just part of it. Right?
Absolutely. All right, let's go into the day-to-day. When do we start a project, the big picture? How do we plan? Jeff, you're known for delivering some of the world's largest and most complex events, like the Olympics, the NFL Super Bowl, FIFA World Cups, etc. How do you approach planning? And I know there's different ways of seeing this, but can you walk us through that process, please?
Well, the planning, it really depends on the project, whether it's an Olympics, whether it's a World Cup, whether it's a Super Bowl. It also depends on the scale, right? So all those are different scales, and we use the term master planning a lot, right? And so master planning can be looked at different scales. One scale of master planning could be at a country or multiple country levels. So if you look at the World Cup, that's going to happen in 2026, 3 countries, 16 cities. And so that's a massive master plan. You can also look at perhaps what LA 28 is doing, so at an Olympic level, and that's at a city master plan level. Yes, country as well, because there will be venues outside of LA, but that's primarily a city master plan. Sometimes, whether it be a Pan American Games or Olympics, you might have a cluster of venues or a precinct. That's a master plan. And then, of course, you go all the way down to a singular venue. Could be a Super Bowl, could be BBVA Stadium here in Monterrey for the World Cup. So these various scales of master plan is what's really important for us. And so it depends where we start. If we start at the bid level, which is usually where we like to start, and sometimes we're working 9 to 10 years in advance of the event. When we worked on the 2026 bid with the United Bid Committee, that was in 27 and 2018. That's finally going to be realized in 2026. So it's very long lead times.
So now add 3 countries for 2026, 6 countries for 2030. So the master planning process keeps getting more complex and complex as we move forward, right?
It does, and 2026 is interesting because we went from 32 teams to 48 teams. That increased the number of venues. First time it's ever been across 3 countries. It's a massive undertaking.
It's going to be very exciting.
I think one more thing I would like to add to what Jeff just mentioned. I have had the privilege of brief experiences working with Jeff's team, and the way they apply the methodology, the skill and the detail in which they go into developing these ideas that could be deployed in the future, it is phenomenal.
So now that you're talking about that, just share with us how important is it to be involved early in the design stage?
Absolutely. It's absolutely critical. And early in the design stage is when, the client has, initial ideas, initial visions of the project. But at the same time, we need to have all facets of the practice engaged, not just, the events practice, but also some of our consultants. A lot of clients here in Latin America actually want to know, okay, here's my vision, how's it going to cost right away? And we need to make sure that early on we are prepared and we have all the right consultants and partners in place to be able to deliver a successful project. If we do the thing, our homework, and have the right people right at the outset, it's going to guarantee a much better result down the future.
So Partho, maybe you can share with us, what it takes when it comes to like identifying the land, maybe helping our clients identify the potential of a site.
Right. So essentially, one of the things we do is once the client has a vision of developing something like a stadium project, especially given today's marketplace, we always advise them to look at, a variety of pieces of land to make sure that we go through a thorough feasibility. So it's not just the stadium, but what if they were to expand into a larger mixed-use district, develop it in that way, ensure that all of the permitting requirements are taken care of. We have, based on the product that we are developing, the programming that we are going into, that they can attract the largest amount of investors. So it's very essential to go through that rigorous process right at the outset.
Wonderful. So when we're scouting for venues, what are those things that we're looking for to identify if, this is a stadium that's going to be a good fit, or maybe this is going to require changes? What are we looking for when we're scouting venues?
Well, there's sometimes a lot of our clients will have their technical things. So if it's FIFA, they'll look at pitch size, they'll look at that space between the pitch, proper field to play, and to the first row. They'll look at capacity, the size of the canopy, perhaps. So these things are all important, but in the world that I live in, not only on the permanent architectural side, but also on the temporary side, and especially with, let's say, events such as Olympics, we're able to really hone in on temporary, and we're able to look at places in a city that are really iconic. So you can date all the way back to Barcelona, 1992 Olympics, when the diving, I don't know if you all remember this, but there was a great diving photo with Sagrada Familia in the background, really put Barcelona on the map. And that has played all the way through. London 2012 had great backdrops, Horse Guards Parade for beach volleyball. Paris 24 had the Eiffel Tower, fantastic backdrop. Versailles was used for equestrian. So really amazing backdrops where you're able to really highlight the sport, but in the context, the backdrop of the city.
So how do you approach Super Bowls? I mean, are NFL stadiums always ready?
Never ready, and nor should they. So when we're looking at any major event, but if we look at Super Bowl, the stadiums are really designed for an NFL regular season game, and that's what they should be. But if done properly, when a Super Bowl comes to town, that extra requirement could be broadcast requirements, security requirements, food and beverage requirements, certainly hospitality requirements. That should all be done temporarily. If we look here again at BBVA for the World Cup, that is a great stadium that's hosts regular season matches, but now the World Cup's going to come to town, and we have to have this kind of accordion effect, right? This ability to add on the extra requirements for the major event.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, my colleague David Lizarraga, who's here, was actually engaged in the design and development of the Rayados Stadium, the BBVA Stadium. It was all developed and designed based on FIFA benchmarks at that point. And then, of course, it had the flexibility to incorporate what Jeff's team came out and is developing as an overlay right now.
So now let's go into the permanent versus flexible. We'll start with you, Partho, with your experience in Latin America, right? So how do you assess when you're looking at a stadium, whether it's better to, okay, we're going to go renovate, we're going to build a new one, or why don't we keep it flexible?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. It's not just Latin America, but a lot of stadiums around the world, a lot of regions around the world, developing countries where you know, there is a limited amount of investment available to look at the development of stadiums. The other part is also, you know, some of the stadiums here are absolutely historic. You know, just look at Azteca. You know, you have Pele winning the World Cup and to Maradona scoring the goal of the century. You know, you have those moments, and those are like perennial memories etched into my brain when I was like a 14-year-old in India watching it on TV, right? So these stadiums, you know, you have to figure out a way to keep the original spirit, try to renovate as much as you can. But then there are opportunities where you can actually work towards, especially given the new kinds of technologies in place, construction technologies, so on and so forth. You can actually insert a decent amount of premium in them to make them relevant, to generate ROI for them. But there is also an opportunity, you know, as you work with the teams, to create new facilities. Because once you create a new facility, you have the ability to make it very flexible, so that it can incorporate all the technologies required, it can incorporate all the other ways to grow your ROI in the future. So I think those are some of the things that we take case by case, and with the client we develop and decide which way we want to go.
I think that's very important, because sometimes people don't understand that at the end of the day is working for what the client needs and identify solutions for them.
Absolutely,
right?
and it's very important to do a robust feasibility. It's very, very important to work with the client. If they have an existing facility, work with that, see what can be done. And of course, if certain benchmarks cannot be achieved, you have to create a new one.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff, maybe you can share an experience where you've seen and tested, you know, a temporary installation that worked. Is there anything you can think of?
Lots of examples.
All right, let's bring them on.
Lots of examples, but I think London 2012 was really a step change in the world of temporary, because if you look at the amount of temporary that London 2012 used, it was the equivalent of the 3 previous Olympics combined. So that would have been Beijing and Athens and Sydney. So you take those combined, and that's the amount of temporary London had. So that had a big impact on future games. So since then, Rio, Tokyo, certainly Paris, large amounts of temporary. That's great, and because I think if you look at Paris, I think they built 1 new venue, and LA 28 will build 0 new permanent venues. So they'll have a large amount of temporary, and what that does is it allows you to go to really unique places. I kind of mentioned them earlier, but when you're at the beach volleyball at the base of the Eiffel Tower, or if you're in equestrian out at Versailles, these are really iconic places where you can really enhance the athletes, the players, and showcase your city. So there's a lot of examples of how temporary is used.
Partho, would you like to maybe share your experience in Nassau? And, you know, that had a huge impact in sustainability. So
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about temporary buildings, you know, and you know, the way Jeff's team works, I saw that live when we developed the stadium for the World Cup cricket, the T20 World Cup cricket that was held last year. There was a very short time span We started in October. I remember flying into Denver, having a meeting with Jeff, the ICC, all the stakeholders were there. And we started the work in October, and the build started somewhere in January. And in June, they basically delivered a 34,000 stadium. It's unbelievable. That stadium was bespoke design for cricket. And some of the spectators, I went to many games there, some of the spectators said, this has been the best cricket experience we've ever experienced, better than cricket icon stadiums like Lord's or MCG. That was because they were the technology was so malleable, you could raise the first row. You could have better sightlines onto the field, which is never done in cricket. But that could be achieved in a temporary venue. So now you can see the other part to that is the sustainability story, which is the stadium was built in such a short amount of time, and what exists today is nothing. It's just a cricket pitch that remains there, and it's all taken away. So this is more than net zero, right? It's not there. So I think we need to learn from that experience that, when we design stadiums, the amount of carbon that goes into the building of a stadium, and then of course we try to create, venues that we say are sustainable, and we say that they're going to be removed, but, there are other issues that come up with it. But here is a story which is absolutely, it was built in a short amount of time, it held a world-class event, 34,000 capacity, and it doesn't exist today.
So talk legacy, right? What do we think is the legacy there? We talked about this yesterday. See if you can remember our conversation. It's memory, right? That's all it is.
Absolutely. What remains in that experience, even today, not just the franchise owners, the IPL owners who came to that event, but also the ardent fans who go to cricket events everywhere around the world still talk about that stadium.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. All right, let's go into the FIFA Club World Cup. I mean, it's starting soon. We've designed, I believe, 5 or 6 of the 12 stadiums that are participating. Just walk us through, Partho, this is a question for you. What does it take to prepare a stadium for these type of events, especially when you're working with FIFA? I mean, you've done this several times.
So, yeah, we've been, Jeff and I have been working on FIFA facilities for a long time now, and FIFA is very diligent. They're very, they always create a benchmark, and these are basically guidelines for developing a stadium or designing a stadium. It covers everything from safety and security of the spectators to the requirements for lighting, the requirements for the number of toilets, and so on and so forth. Not just for the building, but the whole precinct. And you have to keep all of those things in mind when you're designing these stadiums. So most of these stadiums, I would say nearly all of them have compliance with most of the requirements for FIFA. Of course, some of them don't, and then they have to be modified. Like, for example, SoFi is one of the big modifications that is happening. But generally, that's kind of how you approach it to follow it. Jeff,
is there any examples, maybe like, having more press facilities or areas for activation? So you really have to think about the experience in a FIFA game, right? It's what are people looking for?
I think press is a very good point because, depending upon if it's a group event or if it's a round of 16 event, and then it jumps to the quarterfinals, semifinals, the amount of press increases. And it's not just the press in the stadium, it's also your broadcast village, your press, all the requirements for the press that are outside the stadium. So you need to have the flexibility built into the stadium so that it can accommodate that. Because the more you're putting that infrastructure, the less your stadium spectator attendance is reducing. So you need to kind of figure out how am I going to allow this to happen and keep the spectator capacities nearly the same.
Great, thank you. So Jeff, the true cost of a venue, we're going to talk legacy now. It usually, it often lies in what happens after the event. Can you expand on that, please? The true cost of a venue. Is, what happens after.
Yeah. Well, everybody likes to get focused on the upfront capital cost, and that's really important, right? So we have what we call the iceberg theory. So if you think about the portion of the iceberg that sits above the waterline versus below the waterline, quite often what's above the waterline is your front-end capital cost, right? What's below the waterline is your life cycle cost, maybe for the next 30 to 50 years of the life of the venue. So we're talking about maybe it's the debt that you're paying back with the interest. It could be salaries you're paying to your staff, improvements you're making, certainly maintenance, utilities. So that's a big portion of what you need to pay in the future. And so this goes back to right-sizing your venue. So if a World Cup says you have to have 45,000 seats for your venue, but you only need 30,000 for legacy, you should probably think about a design that's 30,000 seats that can increase to another 15,000 up to 45,000 for the World Cup. Do that temporarily. Because if you overbuild, all you're going to do is just increase those life cycle costs. And that's real money.
Yeah, and that's, the thing is, if you trace the history of the World Cup from, let's say, the Germany World Cup to the South Africa, Brazil, so on and so forth to now, you will see how FIFA's direction in terms of hosting the event, in terms of designing the stadium, how it has evolved, and it is more and more sustainable today. Like FIFA like for this World Cup, there's no new venues being built, right?
Right.
It's an exercise where we're taking existing stadiums and then applying the overlay to achieve a World Cup. Look at how different it is from the Qatar World Cup and how potentially sustainable that whole direction is.
The other thing I would add there is a lot of times when we talk about legacy, we think about this physical asset that may be left behind, and that's true. Often, case that is the reality. But I also think, especially when we talk about Olympics or Pan American Games and all these temporary venues I'm talking about, sometimes the legacy is what you don't leave behind. So the fact that you didn't build a permanent whitewater venue or a permanent beach volleyball venue, like these things are not necessary, right? So sometimes you just have to recalibrate your mind in terms of how you think about legacy.
So now, Partho, maybe we talk about when we leave things behind, how can we benefit, long term on that investment? Looking ahead to 2026, how can Monterey benefit? We talked about, ROI. We talked about mixed use, being capped. So let's expand on that.
I think, one of the biggest trends that's happening in the world of venues today is the ancillary development, right? Of course, you have a venue which has the capacity. I think the Rayado Stadium is amazing that, they can up or down their capacities based on some of the small detail changes, like handicap seats can be changed to, normal spectator seats and so on and so forth. But also, generally around the venues, I think more and more franchises are looking to create a district. Very similar to Battery Atlanta and the Truist Stadium, has a very successful mixed-use development right next to it. So successful that the mixed-use development is actually more successful than the stadium itself. So I think many franchises, many ownerships are actually looking at that, and I think that's a very positive step. It can definitely be done through phases. There are programs inside the stadium that actually link with some of the ancillary development that could have larger non-event day uses. I think to increase footfall at the stadium or the stadium precinct is really the goal.
Great, absolutely. So let's talk about journey mapping and fan experiences. What we can do to improve those experiences for fans as we are planning and mapping all these journeys, around a stadium, but also outside of the stadium. Anybody?
Yeah, sure. No, journey mapping for us is huge. We look at every stakeholder that's going to come to the venue, from, spectators, the athletes that are coming, could be broadcast, press, even your own workforce. So we like to really journey map that. We can even dive down deeper and do various personas on the spectators. So it might be your VIP, might be families, it could be your super fan, so all these personas. But what we're trying to do with this, if you think about the various journey maps, especially when we hone in on the athlete and the spectator, is we find these magical moments maybe where we can bring them together. Sometimes these magical moments don't seem so magical, but if you're at a field tunnel where Messi is running off and on, into the locker room, out of the locker room, and you're a kid, you're a 12-year-old, and you get a little high five from Messi, I guarantee you that memory is going to be more important probably than what he or she says on the pitch, right, or sees on the pitch. So these memories, again, these experiences, I think you can, I say fabricate, but you can create, you can develop these moments, these touch points between your spectator and your athletes to really heighten and broaden the day.
Mm-hmm. I think just following up with what Jeff is saying, to a large part in our practice, I think we've learned from the event practice, because they look at the experience of the spectator when they're coming from their homes, from the transit stations, all the way to the stadium. And what is their experience going to be? Nobody's going to come back to your venue if that experience is terrible. Like if it takes 2 hours for you to get home, they're not going to come next year, right? So how do you enhance that experience? That's really important. And it's along the journey, what are you providing in terms of relief and excitement for a person who's purchased a ticket and bringing their family to the venue? The other part is also, as Jeff mentioned, there are opportunities in the stadium. The part where he described, Messi going in and out, that experience itself created the tunnel club experience, right? Tunnel clubs are now part of every NFL stadium, right? The experience of having, field suites, the proximity to the players, that is peerless, right? Those things come out of journey mapping, and those are products in a stadium that have evolved over time.
And there's also opportunities to monetize, right? Like, and look
Absolutely.
at the ROI. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's ideas that can be incorporated, such as when you mentioned, the training, being able to access the stadium before the match begins, and experiencing those things.
That's great you reminded us. So one of the very interesting things that we also do is look at what other sports are doing. Like, while I'm designing my soccer stadium, what are people who are working on cricket and baseball, what are they doing? One of the big things in cricket and baseball is patrons, as they come into the game, watching the players practice in the batting cages, right? That is a really great experience to see that, your favorite stars warming up. That kind of experience has been monetized very well in cricket and baseball. I think that needs to come to soccer as well. To be able to see your star warming up before they go into the game, while they're with the team, conversations, maybe you can't hear the conversations, but you can at least get to see it. Those are elements that we should work to monetize.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the Tunnel Club at TQL Stadium in Cincinnati. That's one of the most fascinating experiences you can purchase. It's like seeing the players walking the field. That's actually a very cool concept. So everything, all of these premium, the diversity to experiences, I think it's something that's evolving, and it's something to look forward to. All right, let's go into global standards. How do we contextualize things to make it local? To make sure, yes, we're working with FIFA's technical manuals, so we have to make sure a stadium complies with those requirements. How do we incorporate that flavor of the city, of the community, and make it truly local? Partho, maybe this is a question for you.
So, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's the Populous experience, but we're also architects and artists, right? One of the first things we try to understand is the nature of the place. What is the region so special for? And every place is very different, has a very strong culture. Monterrey, if you look at Monterrey versus Mexico City versus Guadalajara, these are 3 different cultures altogether, really beautiful. And they need to be expressed in that way. And one of the things we do is we work very closely with the clients, doing workshops with the stakeholders from the city and the region, creating these workshops, creating expressions so that it sits well with the community. Because finally, it's the experience of the spectators from the place, and they need to identify it. Stadiums at one time were one of the capital monuments of a city. They were basically expressions of the city. It's one of the things that is held on postcards. So you need to very well understand what the local context is and basically apply that.
And also deal with local challenges as well, right? Like safety could be a challenge. You know, we need to be able to respond to those things as well.
So one of the things that that we always deal with is spectator safety. You have 50 to 60,000 people coming in and out of the stadium, and we were instrumental in the creation of the Green Guide, which is the guide to safety for sports stadiums, which is now adopted by nearly all organizations like FIFA, CISO, and so forth, for the buildings and also generally incorporated into the building codes to ensure safe stadiums. So those are some of the benchmarks that we will always keep, but within the regional context and expression.
Can we go into what's next for venues in Mexico? What are those trends that we're seeing in sports and entertainment? Can you expand a little?
It's a very large question.
Just to name,
to
let's say
answer.
to name a few.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen the clients interested in is definitely the ancillary developments, the mixed-use districts around the stadium. It is in the minds of a lot of clients, especially. We held a seminar last year with a few clients as well as with FIFA, and you could see the interest they had, especially when they're talking about legacy, about what are the programs that surround our stadium. And it went from museums to greater amount of retail, mixed-use districts, where we actually have patrons, and spectators spend more time in the stadium precinct on an event day. Mm-hmm. So I would say that would be the biggest trend that we're seeing. A larger amount of premium spaces for that level of spectators. I think right now a lot of stadiums just have a few suites. They don't have the level of offering that you have in European and American stadiums. I think most of the franchises are trying to incorporate that. That's another piece that they want to get into.
Which is one of the things that Tottenham was able to do so
Absolutely.
Successfully, right? Extend the dwell hours and offer more extended experiences,
Yeah.
right? All right, so we only have a couple of minutes left, so now we're going to talk about, our passion and like how we feel doing this every day. So let's say when everything works, you're at an event, you're looking at design, you're looking at overlay, everything is working. What is that moment in your career that still gives you goosebumps? Anything you would like to share?
There's several, right?
Okay.
I mean, I've been fortunate to work on several major events from World Cups, Super Bowls, Olympics, and the fun moment is always after you've worked on a project, sometimes almost 10 years before it actually happens. But you're in the stands and you're just talking to the average spectator, and you're asking them, what they like, and they're sharing their story. They're sharing what they like, and that I've been to. I don't know how many venues, hundreds of venues, and I always like to engage with the spectators and get their perspective, right. And it never disappoints, in terms of what they say, what they share, what they like. I can recall one story. This was London 2012. We were at the equestrian venue, which was at Greenwich Park, 100% temporary. It was like a 22,000 seat temporary stadium. And I was sitting in a seat that I thought, this was the seat that I really want to see. It was on axis with the Queen's House, Canary Wharf in the background, and I was sitting in basically an accredited area where the photographers would sit, and average spectators were right in front. And I was sitting there, and spectators started talking. They said, well, I designed the place, blah, blah, blah. They said, well, why are you sitting here? And I said, well, this is the best seat. This is the best seat you want to be at, best seat in the house, right? Because they realized then the setting, the context of the field of play, the context of the Queen's House, Canary Wharf, and they viewed the event much differently. So we have the ability to make big impacts on people's experiences.
I love that. So you know who to speak to when you're trying to decide what's the best seat in the house, right? He's your guy. And Partho, anything that you can think of?
Well, of course, there are, being part of a sports development company, sports stadium design company, you always, we're always encouraged to attend opening day. And, it's a real privilege to go and visit the facility. There's the first game at the stadium, and you're there. And, I've been privileged to visit Yankee Stadium and many other facilities like that. But I think one of the most memorable moments was when Dempsey scored the goal within the first 2 minutes, and it was at the Natal Stadium in Brazil for the World Cup. And the US beat Ghana, especially in the previous World Cup, Ghana had beaten us. And so we beat Ghana. So that was a very emotional moment for me, that this is the stadium I worked on and the US won. But I think the biggest privilege, the biggest privilege is really working with people like you, Sabrina, and Jeff, and all the folks here at Populous. Jorge is here, he's the head of our Madrid office, and I've been privileged to spend a lot of time working with him. And it is that excitement that Populous gives me to wake up every morning and go and look forward to conversations like this with you.
I love that. I mean, we are known, for being a large architecture practice. At the end of the day, the common denominator of all of our buildings is people. It's bringing people together around the things that you love the most, right? For me, I would say the most important thing is that abrazo de gol en una cancha, o sea, hugging your kids and, screaming a goal, and that's all thanks to these guys, building these experiences. That's all we do. Bueno, ya se nos acabó el tiempo. Thank you guys. This has been a great chat. I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed it. Muchísimas gracias por su tiempo y nos vemos pronto. Hasta luego.
Thank you so much.